Good evening, and welcome to a special edition of a Paratrooper and a Yogi walk into a bar with me, Andrew Fox, and sat opposite me at this fine bar is Shana Meyerson, host of the Unapologetically Jewish podcast, no longer the Yoga of War. Her rebrand is complete, and you can follow her on YouTube for that, Unapologetically Jewish. Yes, less yoga, more Jew. And you can follow her here on Substack. So, over to you, my friend.
You invented the slogan. I'm glad you remembered it. And
I did on keeping up as well.
You did. You rebranded me. I just walked into this bar, and there he is, the man who sets the bar for military research and analysis. It's Andrew Fox, co-host of the Brink Podcast, and Mr. Andrew Fox here on Substack and X. Mr. Andrew Fox, I think it's my turn to start today, and I have to start by saying, oh my God.
It is. Can I just point something out?
Yes.
Because I learned something this week, and that is apparently, for those of you on Substack watching, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little heart. And apparently, the more you hit that heart, the more the algorithm on Substack pushes us. So we'd be very grateful if you could all hit the heart and show us some love. And likewise, if you have any questions or anything you want us to address, please do drop them away in the message bar at the bottom, and we'll deal with those when we get a moment, once Shana has given us her weekly lecture.
My weekly lecture. Okay, I am going to keep my points short and sweet, because we've got so much to discuss. Before we start, I have to say escort, okay? Not like the escort that I have that takes me into the bar, but escort and not valet. When we talked on Monday, I was talking about the prospects of the U.S. naval escorts across the Straits of Hormuz, and I definitely
I didn't know where you were going with that. I thought this was about to get very weird, but okay.
Yeah, good. No. Well, you know me with my my weird tangents, but I definitely did not mean that the U.S. was going to take the ship keys and drive them across. I just have basically lost all capacity to come up with simple words, and I promise I am not drunk. I'm just 54. That being said, when it comes to war strategy, which I know nothing about, I always defer to Mr. Andrew Fox's tireless and immaculate research. Andrew, you have dedicated years now to rigorous academic analysis, but I have something different that I bring to the bar, and that is a lifelong immersion in this ideological fight. And I've followed both the kinetic and propaganda wars in real time for decades. Here's how I see it. There are good double standards and bad double standards. Anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist rhetoric relies on bad double standards. But the fact that Israel, since the literal day of its inception, has defied every possible convention, every expectation, I consider that the good kind of double standard. So call it what you want. I also call it God, and I call it a miracle. And it means that many aspects of other wars simply don't apply.
Okay, examples?
Everything. The fact that Israel, on day one of its existence, won against 5 to 7 armies, depending on how you look at it, without even having a military, and won. Look at the 67 war. Look at how we have changed. We Israel have changed the entire world order since October 7th. Who would have imagined any of the things that have unfolded, from the Hezbollah to the Syrian, the fall of the Syrian regime, to the breaking down of mountains in Iran, to like name the thing, to killing leader after leader after leader after leader. I'm just saying that there are different standards because Israel plays by, I shouldn't even say plays by different rules. They have different tools. And some of them are just up here.
Okay. I'm not sure what I can add to that.
You don't have to answer it. Do you want me to make a point that you could answer?
Yeah, that'd be cool. Let's do that.
Okay. Okay, let me make a point. I'll make my first point of the day. So I just want to start with the fact that, as everybody knows, I'm highly biased. I am Israel and the IDF's head cheerleader. And I think that all Western militaries can learn a lot from their tactics and strategies. But I believe we totally need to throw out the lawnmower, and that mowing the grass may have served a purpose in less dangerous times. But October 7th proved it to be an abject failure and a luxury strategy we can no longer afford to pursue. We, meaning Israel and the United States, cannot step out now just to kick the can 1 or 2 or 10 years later into what I think would be a much, much more lethal future.
Got you. I mean, yeah. I mean, the thing is, there are outside factors that are going to play. You know, there's electoral issues. Interesting polling this week, though. Very unusually, the war has become more popular as it's gone on, which is almost unheard of. Because normally, wherever you start on a war's polling, it's only downhill from there. So it's actually gone up, not by much, and only according to Fox. So, but it's still, it's still a change upwards slightly, which is unusual. So that's a kind of a good thing. But we're seeing already rumours that France and Italy, I think it was, are looking to make deals with the Iranian regime to get their tankers out of the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, that's going to slightly undermine the war aim because that will inevitably come at a fairly high price, probably fiscal. So the regime will be getting money there. And they are in a position where, unless the US do something, then they might be able to put a price on this war that's too high to pay in terms of global economics. And we talked about that at the weekend. The other aspect I find really interesting is, what was it? Finance, strategy. No, the points have escaped me. I was too busy talking about my first point and my second
And you're
point.
not even a 54-year-old woman.
I'm not, but I'm at the end of a long week, and I think we're into double, I think over 20 interviews this week now. So I kind of forget which points I've made and which ones I haven't because I've just been making them over and over again.
Okay, I do want to make a point about the popularity thing, though, in the polling. And here's the thing. Politically, Trump needs this win now. So according to the polls that I've seen, he has about 90% support in MAGA. Okay, that's like not just the Republicans, the MAGA. Okay, but he has like 85% of Republican support. And what's interesting is he has basically an equal proportion of Democratic opposition, meaning 85% of Democrats, from what I've seen, actually oppose, and about 50% of independents. This is like an insane, like very simple bell curve that everything is pretty much, as I would assume, statistically predictable. The only thing that Trump has to lose now is his own support base. And the only way he loses that base is by losing the war. With billions upon billions of dollars spent on this war, it'll be utterly catastrophic if it ends with this regime still, I'm going to say, in power. And I'm going to double down on the word power because I'm agreeing with you more and more that I think they will be in place. But the key word is, what kind of power are they going to wield? And I think that if he loses this war, it's going to leave him with very little chance of a third term.
Well, I think the midterms are a given at this point. Looking at the polls for them, that's a slightly different beast. I think nothing he does is going to win the House for the Republicans. So he's got less to lose in that sense when it comes to this war. The other aspect I was going to talk about, is come back to me, was how do you get the Straits of Hormuz open? Because you do have a ticking clock. If the world economy does start sliding, I think that will be a point where they have to stop. And that's always been Iran's strategy, and they know that, which is why they're making these threats to tankers going through. And that is, how do you get them back open again, which is really important. And do we see ground troops deployed, for example, to Karg Island, which is where the Iranians processed, I think it's something like 90% of their oil goes through there on its way out. Do you put a Marine Expeditionary Unit ashore on Karg Island and seize it? I think that's looking likely, if I'm honest. Why would you deploy one if you're not going to use it? CENTCOM have put the request into the Pentagon. Pentagon have said yes, that was announced today. So I think we are going to see some sort of ground action. It'd be interesting to see what that does for domestic popularity. I'm not making a prediction either way. It'd just be interesting to watch. And the other thing is how do you then start escorting tankers through those Straits of Hormuz to actually get the oil flowing again? And can you do it? Can you have you got enough ships to escort everything through so you get back to where you were before the war? So that's going to be one to watch as well to see how that unfolds. And there's a couple of other things I wanted to talk about as well, and that is, of course, the Russian perspective. And then a slightly longer term strategic thing for Israel that I think they do need to be slightly careful of. So Russia has done very, very well out of this war, which makes Europe and Ukraine a lot less safe, which is why my kind of support for the war is guarded, because it might be good for Israel, but it's terrible for me as someone living in Europe. So not super keen from that perspective. And then, which also explains why the European countries aren't getting involved, because I said right from the start we were needed for Russia. I think I'm being broadly proven right on that one. And then the other thing is the consent that Israel is burning again now. We already know that with Democrat voters, they are through the floor in terms of this. They're also through the floor reputationally with Republican voters. The younger generation are something like 45% anti-Israel at this point. And if this war goes on too long, that consent will continue to burn, which isn't a problem now, but it will be in 10, 15 years. And I think it's always better to have a bird in the hand. It's worth two in the bush. Deal with the problems you can deal with now and worry about other problems later. But it is certainly something to be aware of that Israel is now, I said it at the height of the Gaza war, they're in danger of pariah status. I think they're broadly there in swathes of certainly the global south, certainly Europe, and then half of American voters. It's just something they need to start working on the repair job on as soon as this war is over. Because it is serious and it will have proper strategic ramifications for the Palestine issue further down the line.
I basically wrote an article about this just yesterday, Andrew, and this is where my initial disclaimer comes in, which is that when you've been in on the ideological war for decades, as opposed to just this strategic or tactical war, you have to understand that this is nothing that Israel did that can win or can lose global support. It is just anti-Semitism, and it comes around the globe every few generations. It's here. It's nothing Israel did, and it's nothing that Israel is going to be able to do, except that right now they are putting the fear of God in anybody who dares to oppose them, especially as long as Bibi and Trump are on the same side. Now, you said that the midterms are a foregone conclusion. I'm not going to argue if we were to have that vote today. The problem is that nothing is foregone in the future, any less so or more so than this war itself, that there is no foregone conclusions about who's going to win and who's going to lose. And if there is, you just stick with me here for a second, a new world order that unfolds in the next few months as a result of this war, well, then I believe that the midterm elections will not be so much of a foregone conclusion. Now, another reason that the whatever epic fury / roaring lion, and I think it's important to put in both because a lot of people are just referring to as one or the other. This is a joint effort, and it has to be done because, as you said, timing is everything. We don't just have the U.S. midterms coming up. We also have Israeli elections coming up this year. And this right now, right here, may be our only chance. And one of the many reasons we're doing it at the beginning of the year is because these kinds of things are not going to unfold in minutes or hours or days as everybody prays it will. We need a little buffer. We need to make this happen. Here's the thing. Only Team Trump / Netanyahu has the level of personal trust and alignment to complete a mission like this. If you take out one or both of these leaders, the IRGC is going to be popping their, non-alcoholic champagne right away. Lame duck Trump will not be able to get anything done should he lose the midterms. And basically anyone but Marco Rubio, who was voted in as president in 2020, all hopes of engaging Iran before I don't know, before an actual nuke is flying across the globe are almost non-existent. And anyone but Bibi will not have the international clout or influence to be honestly, the indispensable military partner that has made this whole war possible.
Well, I take a very different view. I don't think the threat from Iran was that at all. And also, I'd be delighted if Israel could get a bit of Bibi. I think he's been pretty much a dreadful prime minister who should have gone after 7th of October. That would be my take. And some of the ghastly ministers in his government, like Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, Chikli, like the sooner Israel is rid of those people in positions of power, then the better, I think, for the country. That would be my take. But I try not to talk about domestic politics too much because, frankly, it's not my business, especially it's Israelis' business. But you'll know better than me. There was a budget that has to pass, and if it doesn't pass, then the election's triggered straight away, isn't it? Is that right?
Honestly, I'm as confused about how budgets work in Israel as they are how they work here in America, because we seem to have a shutdown like every 2.5 weeks or so. So I'm not sure, but I do want to say about certain ministers, obviously Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are the one, Chikli just keep coming up. I think that this is in a problem with the whole coalition government system. The conundrum is that it's become so untenable, so overly democratic, that every single group has a say. In fact, the only way to get a coalition anymore is to either go with the Arab Party or the far right, or the religious right, whatever you want to call it. And so it really creates an untenable situation where the truth is Bibi is, as far as Israeli politics are concerned, quite moderate. He's not the hawk that people think he is, and the far right thinks that he's a dove. I mean, we can't understate that fact. So we're I think in a real problem, because should someone other than Likud get the mandate to create a government, and now that all the Arab parties have joined into one party, so instead of Ram having whatever 5 seats and being sort of the man at top, now I think they have something like 11 or 12 or something, that a new coalition is absolutely going to have to choose between an actual anti-Zionist Arab group or a far-right Jewish group. So it's not as simple as just he has bad ministers. It's a lot more complicated than that.
My Israeli friends tell me how worried they are about the Haredi issue and where that takes Israel's future. But that's not what we're talking about tonight. But fascinating digression, hopefully. Sarah's asked, is it true that the US dismantled its THAAD and Patriot systems in South Korea to take them to the Middle East? If so, how can that affect the security of that area? I've seen it reported and denied. So I don't know is the answer. I need to dig into that one. But I don't think they'd move it if they couldn't afford to. I think if it was move this system and all of a sudden China's going to roll, they're not going to do that. So, there is a high level of competency in the US military planning. If not at the governmental level, certainly the military know what they're doing. I've worked with them. They're decent. They're like British staff officers, but they are good without us. So yeah, I don't think they do it if it was significantly risky. So I think we can rest assured on that one. But it is one of those stories that the information warriors would like to make a huge deal out of. And I think that's a really good point to bring up, Shana, is that this really is one hell of an information war we're watching unfold here. I wrote an article about it this morning about people who have situated the results already, and it's definitely going to go really well, or it's definitely going to go really badly, and we don't know. We can make guesses.
I read it, and I heard my name in the first sentence when you made an accusation about the pro-Israel voices.
No, that wasn't you I was talking about. That was somebody else.
Oh, okay.
But I won't go into that particular gentleman. But yeah, but you don't know how this is going to play out. It might go one of a million different ways. If you want me to put not a guess, but a kind of how I'd like to see it going. I think, hugely reducing the regime's security footprint in Tehran, which is exactly what they're doing. So that's good to see. Creating conditions where even if once you stop bombing and you withdraw from this operation, they're so weakened that they can't retain control over those areas, and it gives people that you're throwing money to and weapons to the chance to rise up and take over at least one small part of Iran, and then spread outwards from there once they've secured a seat of power, as it were. I think that's how I'd like it to go. I'd be very surprised if the IRGC just collapsed or turned sides, or if the armed forces changed sides and ended up fighting the IRGC. I think all of those things are disastrous, and I wouldn't want them to happen. I think, as I wrote in my last article, but one, actually, the best outcome here is one that gets the people of Iran free. And
Yeah.
I don't want that to be at the expense of tens of or hundreds of thousands of them dying. I think that is, that is not the outcome that is recommended here. So it has to be done in a manner that leads to as few innocent people dying as possible, and creating the conditions for them to seize a city, even if it's not Tehran. I mean, I think it might be the way the strikes are going now. But yeah, seize a city and then have a seat of power from which they can eventually ink blood out to other regions and eventually kind of get control of it that way. I think that leads to as few people as possible dying and is definitely better than antebellum status quo. So that's kind of how I hope it'll go, but we'll see.
I want to say something else on timing to stack on what you just said, which is the fact that, as we saw, it took America about 2 months to mobilize to get to the Gulf. What would have happened if Iran had made the initial strike? What if Iran laid mines across the Strait of Hormuz and closed that off and started whatever, 1,000 ballistic missiles on Israel because we hadn't preempted those strikes? And it took us months to mobilize, to react. When we're fighting a war across the world, it was very, very important that we made the first strike. Okay, that being said, I also want to just quickly touch on the concept of regime change, because I agree with what you're saying. But the thing I do want to point out, because everyone is noticing that it seems, first of all, Israel and the United States have been very, very coherent on their messaging. And both of them has sort of dropped regime change from their list of war aims, right? And a lot of people are talking about this. Here's the way I see it. Regime change doesn't actually have to be an explicit war aim, because as it happens to be, the only way to accomplish the other goals of the war. I understand, as you explained very well last time, the heavily decentralized and multi-layered structure of the IRGC, but they are being castrated by our joint forces, and they don't have long-term viability without some sort of supreme leader that is not made out of cardboard. I think that
I think that's an error in fact. I would put it. I put that that's not correct. I would suggest.
I do agree with what you're saying about that the people of Iran have to be the ones to overthrow. I agree completely. I don't think it's going to be quick, but it has to be successful. And I think that the U.S. and Israel are working to set up the conditions to make that possible. What do you disagree with?
Just that the IRGC can be treated holistically at this point. I think they are now 32 different organizations with a central core. You can tell their influence is still, still incredibly strong, because they elected the new Khamenei, who is renowned as an IRGC hardliner. And I think if they weren't still having a political influence, then maybe somebody else might have got the gig. But they are designed to absorb these shocks. It's as simple as that. They have this, they call it mosaic command structure, where they've devolved all decision-making power to junior commanders. They've got their target lists, they've got their orders, they can operate independently, and you can't kill them all. And they won't quit, they won't change sides. They're idealists, they're religious fanatics, they're heavily indoctrinated. So you can write off those two options, and there's too many of them just to kill them all, which is why I think the Tehran option, or another city, take your pick, is the way forward. If you want to get this done in terms of regime change, you focus on one city, degrade as much as possible. That's where your militias that you've armed go, and then they take over, and then we go from there. So But I think the idea of, one homogenous IRGC being beaten doesn't really apply. There's sort of 32 if we're going to play in those terms. And then I think the reason they're not saying they want to do regime change, it just gives them plausible deniability. I think they're thinking, yeah, if it happens, then great. If we can set the conditions for it, then great. But actually, what we really want to do is delete Iran as a strategic threat, i.e., a threat that can project its force outside of its borders. If it is the case that they can still project force inside the borders, then that's something you can live with as long as they can't go outside. So I think that they're not talking about regime change explicitly, although they have they've danced around it. They've teased it like that. They've shown a little bit of shoulder, a little bit of ankle. The little flirts. But they haven't said it explicitly, because it just means that if it doesn't happen, they can go, hey, we never wanted that anyway, don't worry about it. I think that's
just revealed my sexy factor and you didn't even blink.
No.
Or laugh. Sorry guys, this is a conversation we had earlier. Okay, so fair enough, but you could say it's plausible deniability, but I see no scenario wherein the IRGC maintains control and, according to all the other war aims, has no ballistic missile capabilities for long-term missiles, has no nuclear capabilities, stops funding its proxies. Listen, Trump is demanding unconditional surrender. I don't see this happening. Whoever is actually alive and heading the IRGC these days, like, their demand, right, is the right, it's so funny. It's like we're back to square one. They are demanding it from a place where they have no right to demand anything. They're demanding to be able to enrich uranium, receive compensation for the damage that has been done, and secure international guarantees, right, that there won't be future attacks. Okay, so between Trump's unconditional surrender and the IRGC's demands, whatever you want to call them, negotiation posture, there seems to be a bit of a chasm here. The thing is, here's the important point. America cannot withdraw from this war as long as Iran insists on continuing it. If they continue to wreak havoc in Hormuz, in sending missiles, whatever, everywhere, hither and nigh across the region, not only can't we back down, but Israel has absolutely zero intentions of backing down before basically Trump makes them, or whatever, all the war aims are achieved. But here's what I can say with confidence. Iran is far more likely to run out of munitions and defensive capabilities long before we do. And we even have a third carrier strike group on the way now. Their capacity is down by something like 90% already, and we're coming in with the third carrier strike group. I think that all they really have left are little ships laying mines in Hormuz, which will be taken care of as soon as we take care of everything else.
Yeah, it depends what they're keeping in reserve and how quickly they can then subsequently rebuild it when the war stops is the tricky thing. So it's not quite that simple. And obviously the Americans have had to go into overdrive on production. At the rate they're firing, they will run out. That's one of the downsides of AI. And, that's something people don't think about. So we talk about something called an OODA loop, which you may have heard of. It was created by a fighter pilot called John Boyd, and it's used in business, but it's observe, orientate, decide, act. And if you can do that loop faster than your opponent, then you generate what's called tempo, which means you're able to think, decide, and act faster than your enemy, which keeps your enemy on the back foot. That's just some good, solid military theory for you. AI is a huge boost for that OODA loop. It enables you to make decisions much, much quicker, because if you think about the sensor array that is out there in modern warfare, like the amount of information coming into our headquarters is far more than a human being can cope with at this point. Intelligence from electronic devices, from signals gathering from people on the ground, from all your eyes in the sky that you've got out there. You know, that is a huge amount of data, and AI can help you process it faster and make decisions faster, and that's great. But it does mean you're then striking targets faster, which means you're burning through ammo faster, which means you need to make ammo faster and have bigger stockpiles before you deploy. So, you know, there's all these little factors of warfare that actually in 2026 probably are happening faster than you ever had to consider in previous wars. So that's just a really interesting military nerdy bit for you. And yeah, also for the OODA loop, there is a para version, the Parachute Regiment version, which is observe, overreact, destroy, apologize, and I quite like that one as well. That one for free. So yeah, you know, the ammo is an issue. And yeah, I've gone off on a tangent, but it's a good tangent. So
But every tangent's a good tangent.
Irene's
But
asked,
every
Irene's asked, where are you two with all my favorite drinks behind you? Obviously, it's the bar. This is
yeah,
Paratrooper.
the bar
I
where
can
we
see. I
meet.
bet I can just imagine that Irene is at home just eyeing up that Bacardi.
I wanted, so Sarah, who has many questions today, thank you, Sarah, for being always so engaged. We really appreciate that you're always here and always so active. She's saying that she's also heard, we've all heard, that they might send in special forces to look for enriched uranium. I'd like to start by addressing that, and then you could jump in if that's okay.
Yeah, please do.
Because I know so much about this. I mean, here's the thing. I definitely agree, and Trump is setting the stage with his words that we may be on our way to boots on the ground. We all know also that regime change cannot be accomplished from the air if that is a war aim. Okay. We know that the American people are going to deeply oppose this. The Israelis are a lot more gung ho about doing anything that they need to do to get a job done. But as you, Andrew, said many times, our war aims are unlikely to be accomplished exclusively from the air. So do we go in? Here's the thing. US and particularly, I will say, Israeli intelligence know exactly where Iran's highly enriched uranium is stored. And I think it's likely that special forces may go in to seize it. Israel is very used to this kind of high risk operation. They've pulled it off over and over in so many different stages, but the Americans are absolutely allergic to boots on the ground. My assumption is that there are Mossad and CIA agents so deeply embedded within every facet of literally Iranian leadership that they will be likely to complete the mission, I think, with one quick surgical operation. Maybe it's not even boots on the ground, but loafers.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's about 300 to 400 kilograms of this stuff, as I understand it, underground somewhere. How far underground, I don't know. I mean, obviously they don't reveal target pack details. That's a tricky mission. You know, this is radioactive stuff. You have to fight in your CBRN suits and your respirator, which is no fun at all, especially when you're clearing tunnels underground. And then you have to have the ability to shift around 300 to 400 kilograms of this stuff. And look, Shaldag have done some really cool missions. I mean, that's an Israeli, they're like the airborne commandos. Means Kingfisher, I believe. The you know they've done some crazy stuff in Syria. You know, there was that underground raid they did in the middle of the war that kind of slipped everyone by, but it was actually really cool. Where they went in and blew up a load of stuff. So Shaldag could be very capable of it. Rangers and Delta, this is well within their mission set. It's just a really honking, awful mission that I don't think they'll be super keen to do. So, you know, something has to be done about it. If it's a stated war aim to remove their nuke capability, so you don't achieve your mission if you don't get rid of it. So they've got to do something. So whether they just smash it from the air and just try and bury it forever, whether they send in commandos, who knows, whether they send in the 82nd Airborne Division and just throw 3,000 troops at the problem. I mean, could be an option. You know, there's things here, but as you say, it is an escalation to send in ground troops. Escalation very often has unintended consequences and is something that people are rightly very scared of and very skeptical of. So yeah, it's a problem set that I'm glad I don't have to solve. It's not there's no easy or quick solution to this one.
Well, Andrew, yes.
Or even an obvious solution, quite frankly.
You and I absolutely have to solve this, and we're not going off air tonight until we do. But
okay,
Andrew,
well, I'll give you a quick hasty training on how to do the 7 questions tactical estimate, and we'll go from there. Okay, question 1: what's the situation and what's my role in it?
Solve the problem.
Question 2: what have I been told to do and why? Question 3: what effects do I intend to have? Question 4 to 6:
change the world.
Yeah.
You're going really fast through these questions. Go ahead.
I designed the syllabus that is still to this day taught at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, so it's my claim to fame.
Very nice. Andrew, did you hear, by the way, last night that there was an explosion so loud somewhere outside of Tehran that people were saying it felt like a 7 or 8 Richter scale earthquake?
No.
Did you hear this?
No, I missed that.
Well, last night, my time, which probably would have been early morning there. So we all know what happened last year when the B-2s came in and took out whatever certain mountains. And there's, of course, so we're talking that we know that they have, how much did you say? 400, 200, whatever?
400, 300, 3 to 400 kilos, which is what, like 800, 900 pounds?
Yeah. So we've shown that we're willing to like move mountains to get that. And that might just be a matter of, collapsing everything or sealing it with God knows what. Okay. Again,
bearing in mind that didn't work last summer. That's the other key point to note, is that Fordo, the big one, was still in operation.
And my other issue, though, is the declared versus undeclared, right? So the IAEA has not been able to do their job anyway, but even when they were only allowed to go to declared sites, which automatically means there's undeclared sites. I am hearing a lot about Pickaxe Mountain, and that I read a thing saying that they thought that whatever they have left is being stored at Isfahan. But I would say if we don't pay attention to Pickaxe Mountain, let's remember that during the so-called negotiations, the Iranian envoys told Steve Witkoff flat out that they were about 10 days away from producing 11 nuclear bombs.
Well, that's according to Witkoff. That's, so who knows?
Right. So, okay.
I can't believe the Iranians are generally quite good at negotiating. I'd be astonished if they've been that stupid. That feels like a load of absolute nonsense coming out of Witkoff's mouth. But anyway,
or a potential threat. So, true or not true? Okay, we don't know, right? It's all hearsay. But I can say that now that we are more than 10 days into the war, I do worry that they are using this time. Why are they continuing to fight when their strikes are down by 90%? I think that they are using this as in cover to accelerate their enrichment and achieve breakout capacity. If it was true, it could be happening somewhere like Pickaxe that for whatever reason seems to be flying under the radar. I don't understand why I'm talking about this in LA, but I haven't heard about the US in Israel making destroying Pickaxe a top priority. And I actually have another question, Andrew. I'm curious what you think about this. God forbid, should Iran get a bomb and detonate it, or a dirty bomb, which is much lower hanging fruit. Like, how would nuclear armed Israel and US respond? I don't know that we would ever use a nuclear bomb in response, and definitely not as an offensive.
Yeah, I don't think they'd first strike. I think that would be
they who?
Israel or America. I can't see first strike being a thing. I mean, God, mate, if that happens, we're in such horrific territory that, frankly, this conversation becomes irrelevant on the spot, because I think it escalates very, very rapidly if they do get to that point, or they declare it and use it as a threat to try and get the war to stop. And then you've got the sort of India-Pakistan kind of standoff. But are they rational enough to maintain that standoff? Because look, there's a great argument that if India and Pakistan weren't both nuclear, there would be a lot more war between those two. They had their fisticuffs last summer, where the Indians smashed up a load of stuff on the ground in Pakistan. The Pakistanis shot down a bunch of Rafales of the Indian Air Force, and everyone kind of drew stumps at that point, to use a cricketing analogy, which is very appropriate for those two things. But it would have gone a lot more violent on a conventional level if they hadn't both been nuclear, and they're therefore keeping it down to a lower threshold of violence. I'm not convinced that applies to Iran, because they're not rational. And they've shown that time and time and time again since 2 Fridays ago, or whenever this war started. I forget how long it's been now. It's been a blur.
Yeah.
What are we on day?
Yeah, this would be day 14.
Day 14, yeah, I thought so. So, the amount of irrational shit they have done in the last 2 weeks, it defies belief. And I was chatting to
yes,
I work with, called Barak Sina, and if you've not read his stuff, really recommend it. He's a top guy, and on top of that, he's written 2 really, really good papers. One about Israel 2048, one about the Iranian regime. You can find them on the Henry Jackson Society website, henryjacksonsociety.org. But I was chatting to Barak this week, and we both agreed we couldn't believe the amount of absolutely mind-blowingly stupid stuff the Iranian regime has done in the last 2 weeks, like own goal after own goal after own goal. And it's because, go back to the psychology, they are not rational thinkers in the way that we would understand it. They are religiously motivated extremists who have a very, very warped, perverted worldview due to their crazy religious views. And it's making them act in ways that, certainly from the outside to us, look incredibly dumb. I think that's the way to put it.
For lack of a better term, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, just a reminder, folks, if you're enjoying this, please do hit that little heart button down the bottom. It gives us an algorithm boost, and we'd be very grateful for it. And likewise, if you have any questions, comments, please drop them in that message box, and we'll address them as we go. But yeah,
I want to interject in response to what you're saying about India, Pakistan. And I think that when I look at that war that lasted like a day, I mean, I could be off by a few hours.
Yeah, it was just fisticuffs, wasn't it? It wasn't a proper war.
Yeah. But it could have been, as you said. But I think that what confounds me is, if we look at the history of wars, why are we measuring major wars? I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about this one. In days and weeks instead of months and years. We are fighting a war against an Islamist ideology that has literally entrenched itself for centuries. And after 2 weeks, people are asking, when is this going to end already? This is going to take more than 2 weeks. And here's the thing that
I think that's why people are asking this, because they've just looked at the oil barrel prices and how much they're paying to fill up their cars even today. And I think that's
how much are they going to pay with a nuclear powered Iran? So we have to understand that there's trade-offs. But Andrew, last time we talked a few days ago, you were making the point when I said, will NATO step in? And now we have a French soldier who was killed last night also, but because I guess they're right outside of the borders of NATO and also on a base, that's also not going to trigger Article 5, though things seem to keep floating into Turkish airspace. But I had said, maybe at some point NATO or the European Union, Britain, it doesn't matter, will come in to help. And you said that basically they can't help. But I'm wondering if perhaps the reality of this war and the fact that the entire world is now aligning on one side or another, you're either on team, I'm going to call it team Russia, China, even though Iran and North Korea are clearly on that axis, they are sort of the heads, or team USA and whomever else. But I'm wondering, though, if this war and the urgency of it may just shake NATO out of this post-World War II pacifism and complacency that we'll see global level preparation for what comes next?
Look, NATO's already involved. America are fighting. So let's just remember that. NATO and America are not two different things. They're the same thing. And then
Hold on. But
look,
a square is
look,
a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square. All NATO forces aren't in the way that all US
no,
forces are
the
in.
NATO
But
member
go on.
state, NATO member state is. But anyway, look, the opinion polls just aren't going to stack up. Like, look at Italy, like 56% against, nearly 80% of left-wing voters. Germany, 58% are against it. So, even in Germany, 58 of all voters say they're against it. 75% are concerned it would spread to other countries. Trust in the US in Germany sits at 15.15%. In Germany, 17.17% of correspondents consider Israel a reliable partner. 49% of Britons oppose the strikes, 28% support them. And this is a week ago, and those figures will be worse now. This is incredibly unpopular over here. I don't think you can underestimate how unpopular this war is. There's not a chance a European politician is going to send troops in or join the airstrikes. It's just
I'm
not
not
going.
talking about that. I'm talking about preparing for future wars. I mean, on top of the fact that Trump is making other NATO allies pay their fair share, that just to
No,
say,
no, I'm standing up to this. This is Russian propaganda bullshit. We've always paid our fair share. And on top of that, we are very capable in Europe. We have good armed forces that are very capable. And it's a fully Russian narrative that has dominated the American political environment, that somehow America's been paying through the nose for European defense. It's absolute bollocks. It was by design after World War II because they didn't want another world war that the Americans persuaded the Brits to hand over all their empire. And America got phenomenally wealthy off the defense investment they had in global defense. So this Trumpy Putin bullshit is nonsense. It drives me mad when Americans chirp up about this online because it's just not true. Like, we have very good, very capable armed forces in Europe.
okay, last week when I said what would happen if NATO has to step in, you not last week, on Monday, you literally said that NATO doesn't have anything and that whatever they have wouldn't make any difference in this
No, I
war.
said no. I said that what we've got won't make any difference.
Yeah.
And it won't. Like, it's already if it's at 100, you can't add to 100. You can't. It's not like Spinal Tap where you can turn. What's higher than
To
10?
11.
You can't turn the war up to 11. It's already at 10, and it doesn't go any further. So, it's any involvement from other countries would be a diplomatic thing rather than something that actually would be militarily useful. Where it might be useful would be to see ships in Hormuz. That's the one thing that I could see happening. Like, I know the French are steaming their Charles de Gaulle carrier down towards the Middle East now. They could be useful, but then the potential is that they'll get drawn in and targeted by the Iranians, which there's not a capital city in Europe that would be interested in that. So again, I think the chances are low, but what they'll do instead is try and diplomatically pressure to get the war to stop. But there is a wider point here, and I do maintain that part of this is due to those 2 years of propaganda against Israel that have been, you rightly point out, it's always been this way. And go read that book by Jeffrey Herf I spoke about, undeclared wars against Israel. It's a pretty good read anyway, but it's the same playbook. You could literally change the date
Absolutely.
1972 to 2026, and you'd recognize all the tactics. The difference is, of course, that it's hypercharged by social media in a way that it never was before. It can spread around the world faster. It can get into people's phones. People are seeing airstrikes on their phones within minutes or seconds of it actually landing. And that, I think, has brought the war to life in a way that previous wars never have been, not even Ukraine.
See, I
And
agree.
then these malign
Yeah.
actors who've always been there can really easily attach their narratives to it, and that is hypercharged this stuff. And so 2 years of that, the idea of any European country going to war alongside Israel, I think, is just a non-starter at this point because they're so despised, frankly, around the whole continent.
Okay. So Israel has two choices. Either defend themselves from existential threat from terrorists basically on every single border and be hated, or lie down, die, and be cheered for being killed. I'm sorry, but again, this is another double standard, and I couldn't give two flying F-bombs what anybody thinks about whether they like Israel or don't like Israel. The Islamist propaganda that has taken over the world has poisoned the well. These statistics that you're throwing out about whether Germans or Italians or French or Brits or whatever support or like Israel are irrelevant to all things other than the fact that they are public opinion. The fact is, it's the same exact anti-Semitism that drove World War II. And if we're going to lie down and succumb to that, we're going to wind up with another Holocaust. And I'm not being dramatic. If at nothing else, it forces every Jew in the diaspora to go to Israel, because I don't feel safe in LA anymore. No one feels safe in Britain or New York or South Africa or Sydney anymore. We all go there, and as Iran says, it's a one-bomb state. And all of a sudden, the Americans who hate Jews finally get control of America again. And the Europeans who already hate the Jews are in charge of Europe. I'm sorry, but these opinion polls mean nothing other than that Israel needs to fight harder and more furiously to ensure its existence.
Yeah, but what they mean is that Europe's not going to join in, and that's what we were talking about, was whether other NATO countries are going to chip in. And I'm saying they're not.
They're going to either Europe.
Their politicians lose votes over it. That's the point I'm driving at. It's not, the point isn't necessarily that Israel is hated. More is the point that politicians will look at electorates, and if electorates are wildly against something, they won't do it. And that's why when you asked if NATO will join in, I'm saying I'm almost certain they won't for that reason.
First of all, it literally not just boils my blood, but makes me want to vomit to have this conversation, because it's so deeply rooted in the evil tendencies of society that it really, really upsets me to the core. It has nothing to do with you, Andrew. It has to do with the world. No, I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't say it. What you're saying is true, but it's sickening, it's sad, and it's not viable when we talk about Israel's actual fight in how important. This is why a couple weeks ago, like the day before the war started, I'm like, let's talk about India. And we had planned a whole show to talk about this India alliance. I have pages of notes that I wrote down of points I want to make in that Israel needs these alliances. By the way, they still have alliances with Russia and China, not because they're bad, not because they're evil, but because they need to find the support wherever they can get the support. People don't understand what it means to have a tiny country of 9 or 10 million people that the whole world is obsessed with destroying or delegitimizing, or not the whole world, a large percentage of the world. And again, it comes back to my original point of double standards. But I do want to make a positive point, if I may. I want to start with just a couple days ago, the UN Security Council finally passed a resolution against Iranian attacks on the Gulf states. Okay, surprising enough that they would make a resolution against a radical Islamist regime, but then again, they're also protecting other radical Islamist regimes, so it was probably just a coin toss. I am still waiting, of course, for their condemnation of Iran's use of prohibited cluster munitions and unbridled civilian targeting in Israel and the Gulf states, which, never mind, they already condemned. And by the way, for October 7th at all. But here's the thing. Here's, if I may lend sort of like a positive note to all this. I do believe that we are at an inflection point where things may just turn around for public opinion and diplomatic alignments when it comes to Israel. So not just militarily, where they've absolutely proven without beyond the shadow of a doubt that they have overwhelming dominance in the Middle East. But diplomatically, more and more, I'm seeing even some vocal Israel detractors. I'm not talking about like psycho, whatever, Candace Owens or whatever. I'm talking about people who have not in any way stood by Israel, that are suddenly at least referring to Israel as a model ally of the United States. Because I might add, they are. Just this morning, Pete Hegseth, who has always been in the Israel corner, but he used in words, he actually stated, I don't have the actual quote, but he stated in almost these exact words that the United States objectives are Israel's objectives, period. No daylight is being projected. And whether Israel is respected or feared on the world stage, the result is the same. I think that this unprecedented partnership and coordination absolutely positions Israel not only as a true global superpower, but I think people are finally starting to understand the nature of both the alliance between Israel and the United States and of our enemies.
If you say so. I retain my skepticism, but
tell me what about that do you? I mean, I've literally, there are certain podcasters I listen to who were, I had to turn off because they were so anti-Israel that it was making my skin crawl. And I'm listening to them now, and they, even if they don't say the words, Israel is great, Israel's a superpower, Israel is all the things that I think that they are, heroes and in all the things, they are just using Israel colloquially in the same sentence as America without a blip, just saying these two powers are executing this war together. They are accomplishing these goals together. I'm talking about very pro-American, far-right podcasters. And I don't know that they realize how much credit they're giving to the Jewish state for what they've accomplished, but they are. And respect and fear are being instilled in
no, I think
our
that's
enemies.
just a very Amerocentric view, I think is probably where you're going with that. I see what you mean now with that final clarification, but yeah, I don't think it applies anywhere but America. So yeah, we'll see, I guess. We'll see if the polls shift, and I think that's the important thing. And I wouldn't take stuff said in press conferences particularly seriously because it is an information war, remember. Vanessa's asked, what role do you see China and Russia playing as days go by? Any comment on America easing sanctions on Russia? Yeah, disgusting, sickening to see Russia profiting from this. Disgusting decision by the White House. Yeah, it's just shameful the way they've treated Ukraine and continue to do so, especially after the Ukrainians have offered drone defense assistance to the Gulf states as the world. And Trump was dismissive of them today about their offer as well. Yeah, the guy's in Putin's pocket, and I won't be persuaded otherwise. They must have something on him. That's the only thing I can think of. Even if you look at the language he uses, when it was revealed that Russia was giving information to help target American troops in the Gulf, Trump was like, it's fine, don't worry about it. And Witkoff was like, I spoke to the Russians. They said it was fine, don't worry. Really, compare that to the way he spoke about the UK or whatever. Like, something's rotten there. Something's deeply, deeply rotten in Trump's relationship with Putin. But I don't see Russia getting involved, particularly they're tied down in Ukraine.
Yeah.
They're not going to, they don't have the resources right now, frankly. And they've just had this unexpected, big, beautiful windfall of cash from oil prices and sanctions being eased. They'll be delighted. They'll be too busy killing Ukrainians because they're disgusting, sick bastards.
If I could just stack really quickly on the disgusting, sick bastards, they also are way more rational than, say, Iran or North Korea. And I do believe that neither Russia nor China wants to get in direct conflict with the United States, especially since United States munitions are destroying the hell out of whatever Russia and China have been providing for Iran, not to mention taking out their air defenses in, like, I don't know, what, 5, 10 seconds, 11 seconds?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't give them the God tier stuff. I think that's probably a little bit of too soon to say because they're really deep. And the missiles scored some really good hits against Chinese stuff operated by Pakistan scored some really, really good hits against India during that little kerfuffle last year. So I think it's a little too soon to say it's definitely, and I don't think Iran had the S-400s either. But yeah,
But
if you have a good, look, bottom line is if you do suppression of enemy air defenses well, then there's nothing you can't stop. And I think the Americans do it well. And you're right, China won't get involved. But also China have a very long-standing non-intervention policy. So they'll be trying to support Iran diplomatically, economically, where they can. And, we're seeing Chinese, oil going from Iran to China. Even this week, they've been still getting the tankers through. So that they'll be doing it that way, but they won't get involved militarily because China don't do that.
Yeah, we need to somehow extract ourselves from a number of things. One is the trade that we have with China, that we've become so dependent on Chinese-made goods that it would be very hard for us to really, let's just say, even intervene to the point where we actually cut off China from Iran, because in a way that would be a declaration of war. But I also believe, and I've been talking about this for decades, that we need more than just energy independence. I mean, we could drill, baby, drill, but we need alternative sources of energy. I'm not saying this because of just the environment. That's a nice byproduct. But we need to get off oil. When we get off oil, we cut off the financial resources of the world's worst actors. We see that
America's already is, aren't you? You're already energy independent, I believe.
Sorry, I'm not talking about America. I'm talking about the world.
Yeah, I'm losing track of your we's tonight. Is it America? Is it the world? Is it Israel?
Sorry, I need to. It's the royal we, and I, as queen of the world, am now talking about the world.
Yeah, you need to get a grip of your. Get a grip.
But Andrew, yeah, joking about that. You know what we do have to touch on? I know it's super late there, and we didn't touch upon this last time. Was we do need to touch on Hezbollah and maybe a little tiny bit about Hamas. Do you want to start with a point, or do you want me to? Where are you?
Yeah, I mean, look, they're kicking Hezbollah out of that southern part of Lebanon, south of the Litani. They haven't got the troops to sort of do it all in one big sweep, so I think it'll be bite by bite as they go through. I think it'll be not quick. But Hezbollah's response has been pathetic. They got 100 rockets off last night, no hits. Like, is that all you got, guys? I mean, this is their big operation that they launched, and they managed 100 rounds compared to what they were firing 8th of October 2023. This is nothing. Again, it just shows you how degraded they've been over the last 2 and a bit years. So it's a nuisance from Hezbollah rather than anything decisive. I would keep an eye on the Syrians. They've parked themselves on the Lebanese border to make sure Hezbollah can't try and re-infiltrate into Syria, allegedly. We'll see what they do, see what the Syrians do, because I don't trust them under al-Sharaa. I think they're a little bit opaque. It does mean that Turkish influence is right on that border as well, because the Turks and HTS in Syria go hand in hand. So Turkey, something I'm always keeping an eye on at the moment, because they do have those regional hegemonic ambitions, and they've just bought Guterres by giving him the Ataturk Peace Prize. So well done, Secretary General of UN, for all the superb steps towards peace you've undertaken in the last 2 years. Well done, cracking job. Here's a prize. So keep an eye on the Turks. And then keep an eye on the Lebanese government as well, because they finally started saying things like the IRGC aren't welcome here anymore, which is kind of unprecedented. But they are also a zombie state. They are also still scared of Hezbollah and their methods of assassination and intimidation. There's no, again, just as always with Israel's wars, there's no quick, easy, or obvious solution. But they're doing what they have to right now to keep those northern communities in Israel safe.
Yeah. If I could make a quick side note, because I just looked at my Substack and realized that I only see you. Does anybody see? Oh, I see what happened. You don't have it on gallery view. Okay, that's okay. So only one talking head at a time, so they can't see your expressions when you react to what I say. That's probably a good thing for me. So anyway, yeah, the thing about Hezbollah, I think, again, I think we touched upon this. I think this was a gross miscalculation by the IRGC. They're not acting alone. They did this because the IRGC told them they had to. And when you said that that Ayoun, the president of Lebanon, is saying some good things. Among the things that apparently he said, and a lot of things are said in this world, or that part of the world, that aren't necessarily followed through upon, it was that he actually expelled, from what I understand, the IRGC leaders who came into Lebanon to command Hezbollah. So that was a concrete step. I do believe, and I've been saying this for a long time, that Ayoun does want to see Hezbollah out of Lebanon, if not as a political force, at least as a military force. And I just think that the problem is that he doesn't really have the ability, quite frankly, to take Hezbollah on. Another interesting thing, though, was that was it Al-Shara, or what's his name now? Not Al-Julani anymore.
Now he was
yeah. Yeah, so he also has come out vocally saying that he opposed any Hezbollah aggression and is actually securing the border to avoid any like spillover effects into Syria. Keeping in mind that Syria has also prevented Iran from sort of infiltrating Syria and using Syria as a launching point for attacking Israel. So it's interesting to see. I've really been on the fence and more on the side of skepticism about him. But it looks as making Al-Julani, Al-Shara is making some actually direct overtures that might have some serious impact, positive impact.
Yeah, again, it's one of those ones to keep an eye on and keep unfolding. And I'm not gonna stick my reputation out there and try and predict what's going to happen, because I think it's just too many variables on this one.
Okay.
Cool. And before we go, did you want to say anything about Gaza? I don't really have a huge amount to discuss there, but if you've got something burning,
yeah,
feel free.
I do have something tiny and burning that could be huge, but I think it's tiny, which is the fact that, again, I say this every week, I don't remember if it was like 3 days ago or 3 years ago, but in the last week, Qatar actually informed the United States that it's expelling Hamas leadership from its borders due to their refusal to condemn the Iranian attacks on their territory. Now, everyone...
That's what it took. Like, all the shit Hamas has done in the last 2 years. You didn't get out.
Do you remember about a year or a year and a half ago, again, I have zero timeline left anymore, that supposedly they had already expelled Hamas leadership, and it was said that they had gone to Turkey. Yeah. So I don't know. So that's what I'm saying. It may be a big thing. It may be a small thing. But now that their own proverbial asses are on the line, maybe they actually believe it. And I guess the only other thing I'd like to throw out there is that everyone, I mean, Hamas is now on the back burner, right? And everyone's been predicting what is going to happen to them after Iran is decimated. In fact, there's a lot of people who have said for the last 2.5 years that Israel should have gone straight for Iran and just don't even worry about Hamas, or maybe Hezbollah and Iran, but that Hamas was sort of a fly in their ass. So most people are predicting, of course, that Qatar and Turkey are going to take over the role of sugar daddy for Hamas. But now that Qatar
in fairness,
they just kicked them out, if they kick them out. So I don't know. It just seems... It seems like things are changing, and I just keep seeing Hamas that is just surrounded by Israel, really in a very contained space, ready to be decimated. And on that note, is there anything else that you'd like to add before we welcome the Shabbat?
Of course, it's your special day, isn't it? Good times. Um, no, I don't think so. Other than we'll do this again on maybe Monday. I need to check my diary for this one because I think I've got something on Monday night. I will let you know as soon as possible, and we'll get that confirmed.
The
Um,
world's most popular man.
well, there's a war in the Middle East on, and I'm a Middle East conflict analyst, so these are my busy days,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But yeah, it's been good fun, and thank you to 116 people for tuning in tonight. It's great that you could come and join us and listen to us to rattle on. I hope you found it useful. Um, but please do go follow Shana on Substack if you don't already. And we will see you all. Get Malcolm Nance on. Yeah, that could be really fun. I'll message him. That could be a really good interview. He's a good dude. Very good on Ukraine. Yeah, but I guess until next time, folks. Shabbat shalom to those of you who observe, and cheers.
I thought for sure you were going to say the L'chaim this time, so I'll say it.
I'll leave it to
L'chaim.
you.
I'll see you next time, Andrew. Thanks to everybody for coming, joining, and being so active this evening.
Bye bye.
Bye.